Okay, we'll look at some uses of the half angle formulas here. I have a few different problems. I wrote the formulas in the upper right. I do want to point out, notice the plus minus in front of the three formulas for sine, cosine, and tangent of the half angles. You have to figure out which quadrant you're in, right, to determine if it's going to be a positive or a negative result. Otherwise, the formulas all hold. Notice for tangent, we have three different formulas as well. And all these bottom two are is a variation of the top two by multiplying by the conjugate of either the numerator or the denominator. So when you multiply by 1 plus cosine, you'll get one of them, and the top one, in fact. And when you multiply by 1 minus cosine, the conjugate of the denominator, you would get the last result. Now we still need to keep in mind, is it positive or negative, though? I'm not sure why this wasn't rewritten, and it usually isn't. But we'll go ahead and use one of those examples. In this example here, we'll use one of the formulas to show like we do need to think positive or negative. Okay, cosine 7 pi over 8. First things first, let's think about where we land. Okay, 7/8 of pi. Well, 1 pi is 180 degrees, right? So 7/8 of a pi is somewhere over here in quadrant 2. In quadrant 2, cosine is negative since only sine is positive. So therefore, I know my final result will be negative. And that's why, while looking at this formula, we're going to go ahead and use this formula, right? But I know that I'm using the negative square root of the formula for this example because that angle is in quadrant 2. Now, how do we use this? Let me do this kind of off to the side here. I'm saying 7 pi over 8 is my half angle, right? I'm saying 7 pi over 8 is my half angle, alpha over 2. Why is that important? Because look at the formula. We need to know the original angle, right? We need to know cosine alpha, or double that angle. Whatever this angle is here, I need to double it. So I set this up. You may not always do this, but notice, right, if I called 7 pi over 8 alpha over 2, to see what alpha is, I need to multiply both sides by 2. The 2 and the 8 would simplify to a 7 pi over 4 is alpha. 7 pi over 4 is on the unit circle. That is down in quadrant 4, right? 7 pi over 4 is here. So that's important because in the formula, I need cosine alpha. Right? In that formula, I'm going to use cosine 7 pi over 4, which cosine in quadrant 4 is positive. Okay. One last thing, if you had thought, because like with a double angle, right, you're actually cutting that angle in half. Well, if you try to cut that in half, you'd be at 7 pi over 16. That's not helping us at all, okay? But that's still not on the unit circle. So that leads me to, I need this half angle formula, besides the fact that I'm doing a video on half angle formulas, right? All right. So cosine says 1 plus cosine alpha. So 1 plus cosine alpha is 7 pi over 4. I'm going to go and write that all over 2. Okay, cosine of 7 pi over 4, though, is root 2 over 2. So we have a negative square root 1 plus root 2 over 2 all over 2. Okay, these get kind of ugly here for a second. I don't like fraction over fraction. That is not simplified. Let's multiply the numerator and denominator by 2, clear the fractions. So we have negative square root 2 plus root 2 all over 4. And last, the denominator we could simplify, right? Square root of 4 is 2. And these often come out ugly. We get negative root 2 plus a root 2 within the radical all over 2. And that is your answer. That is an exact answer. If you plug that in the calculator, you would get the same thing as if you plug in cosine 7 pi over 8. But we always want exact answers, not approximate. But calculators are a good way to verify your work. All right, looking at this next one, tangent of negative 3 pi over 8. So again, kind of thinking half angle. So what is alpha? If this is alpha over 2, what is alpha? Because looking at tangent, all three of these require us to know alpha. So alpha then is negative 3 pi over 4. Okay, taking a step back. Which quadrant is negative 3 pi over 8 in? Negative 3 pi over 8 is not quite half pi, right? So it's in quadrant 4. In quadrant 4, tangent is negative. So keep that in mind. Your final answer needs to be a negative. Okay, I'm just going to leave that right there for now. Now for alpha, negative 3 pi over 4, that would be here. Right, we're in quadrant 3. And in quadrant 3, since these formulas rely on cosine and sine, depending which one you choose, both of those are negative, right? I'm going to go with the bottom one. I don't know. It looks like maybe it's going to be best, but honestly, they'll probably all come out to the same amount of work. Let's go ahead and try it. Okay, again, I'm going to leave this negative till then. I know my result should be negative. All right. So we have 1 minus cosine alpha. So cosine of negative 3 pi over 4 is going to be root 2 over 2 negative, right? Negative root 2 over 2. Sine, again, we're at quadrant 3, is negative root 2 over 2. So in the numerator, I have 1 plus root 2 over 2, and in the denominator I have divide negative root 2 over 2. I guess we could multiply by the conjugate. I don't really know what's going to be the quickest way to simplify. It doesn't matter. I'm going to first just multiply by 2. Let's get rid of the fractions. Okay, multiply everything by 2. So we have 2 plus root 2. Okay. Since those 2's canceled. And then in the denominator, we just have those 2's cancel, negative root 2. Well, it's still not simplified, right? You shouldn't have a square root in the denominator, so let's multiply by root 2 over root 2. And then we have 2 root 2 plus plus 2, right? Root 2 times root 2 is 2. Over a negative 2. All of these can be reduced by 2. So let's divide that out. And we would have square root of 2 plus 1 and then divided by negative 1. So let's move that negative up top. Negative 1 plus or 1 minus root 2, right? We're dividing by negative. Let's just make it all negative. Negative 1 minus root 2. I'd said at the beginning, just kind of make sure your answer checks out. If you put this in a calculator, you do get negative, right? So I'm good to go. I had said over here I wasn't sure about this plus minus. You know, we don't need it because the sine and the cosine will work itself out, whether it should be positive or negative, but still a great check. I actually had started this video and I messed up somewhere in my computation, but I knew it should be negative, right? And I couldn't find it, so anyways, made a new video. Okay. This next example, I didn't leave a lot of room, and here's why. The left-hand side has a tangent squared. The right-hand side has a tangent cubed. So if I can get just a tangent out of this stuff, then they match, right? Tangent squared multiplied by a tangent would be tangent to the third. And comparing the half angle formula, I'm going to highlight it. I have a sine over 1 plus cosine, that's here. But notice alpha is 2 theta. So I'm going to put a 2 theta in for alpha. Okay, that's being weird. That's fine. Whatever. Tangent 2 theta over 2. Well, the 2's would cancel, and I would just have tangent theta. And then I still have this tan squared. So I manipulated both sides slightly, but they do in fact equal, right? We verified that identity is true. Once you get one side to match the other side, you're good to go. All right, last example. Tangent is negative 4 over 3, and we're in quadrant 4. X is in quadrant 4. I'm now finding sine, cosine, and tangent of these half angles. All right. Well, sine alpha over 2, all I need to know is cosine alpha in order to complete this. So if tangent is negative and we're in quadrant 4, then cosine should be positive. Let's draw a triangle though. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So it's like, well, I don't know which one is negative. Don't worry about it for a second, right? I'm in quadrant 4. In quadrant 4, I know tangent's negative, plus it's given. I know sine in quadrant 4 is going to be a negative, but I know cosine is going to be a positive. So again, we don't need the angle. Use Pythag, you'll see this is a 3, 4, 5 triangle. I'm not going to do that work. But sine is negative 4 over 5. Cosine adjacent over hypotenuse 3 over 5. So that's why we didn't really need to worry about positive or negative in that one. Now if you drew it accurately in quadrant 4, you would notice the y, the 4 would be the y, and that is in fact negative, but I preferred to do it like this. Okay, so sine alpha over 2. The next thing we want to kind of think about is we need to know, is it plus minus, right? Which one? So if I'm in quadrant 4, I'm going to do degrees because it's easier. I'm somewhere between 270 and 360, right? So if I half that angle, because x is somewhere, oops, that's fine. X is somewhere in there. So if I half it, half of 270 is 135. That's somewhere like right here. And half of 360 is 180. Then x over 2 is somewhere right in that range. So quadrant 2. Quadrant 2, sine is positive, cosine is negative, tangent is negative. All right, good idea to keep those in mind as we do this. Okay, sine x over 2, sine alpha over 2. So I know it's positive, and we do 1 minus cosine 3/5, all divided by 2. So that's square root of 2/5 over 2, or 1/2, right? So we get square root of 1 over 5. Multiplied by the reciprocal, right? 2 over 5 times 1 over 2. And honestly, I'm good with that answer, but if we multiplied by if we rationalize it, we'd get root 5 over 5. Okay, cosine is very similar. Notice the only difference, sine we have a minus, cosine we have a plus. So if we had, so that's sine, sorry, let's be clear on what our answer is. So cosine now, I know it's negative, and I'm adding 1 plus 3 over 5, right? I'm doing this 1 plus 3 over 5. So that's 8 over 5 over 2. So I'm just going to skip that step. 8 over 5 over 2. So 8 over 5 times a half is 4 over 5. Again, if you rationalize and square root of 4 is 2, we'd get negative 2 root 5 over 5. I'm not going to spend much time showing that. You can do that algebra there. All right, tangent. It's up to you, right, which formula you want to do. I'll go ahead and do the top one this time. I really don't think it matters. Tangent. So we said the answer is going to be negative. And 1 minus cosine alpha, that's like what we got for sine. We get 2/5, right? So I'm going to do square root 2/5. And then 1 plus cosine, that's what we got for the numerator of cosine. So 8 over 5. Also, why does that make sense? Because tangent is sine over cosine, right? And those 2's would cancel. Anyways, so now the 5's cancel. 2 over 5 over 8 over 5. And we get 1/4. Square root of negative 1/4. Well, we can do square root of 1 is 1, square root of 4 is 2, so we get negative 1/2.